Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming today. My name is Phaedra Boinodiris. I am so pleased to talk to you. My talk today is on the intersection of artificial intelligence and play. My background is in games and game design. A little bit about me. I'm a serial entrepreneur. Prior to joining IBM, I had several companies over a series of about 15 years. One of my companies was called WomenGamers.com, and we started the first scholarship program for women to pursue degrees in game design and development within the United States. Did that for many, many years, and then there was a big shift in the market. So I went to go back to business school to get my MBA. I wanted to learn more about going after venture capital funding, and I wanted to start my own studio. And whilst I was there, I did a whole bunch of different kinds of competitions. They're called case competitions. And this is when a company will go to a business school with a real life challenge. And the students have overnight to come up with ideas and then pitch those ideas the next day. So IBM came to the school, and there was a contest between UNC Chapel Hill and Duke University. So we're big basketball rivals. And the challenge was that they had this software called Business Process Management Software, and they were looking for innovative ways of explaining it to non-technical people. I had no idea what this stuff was. Maybe it was because at the time I was playing a lot of strategy games. But in my mind, as I'm reading this, I'm thinking, okay, you tweak different business rules. You're seeing how it affects your broader ecosystem. You could have competing models. You could collaborate around a model. And so I tell my teammates, hey, we should pitch a strategy game. And there was this one guy on my team, and he and I started arguing. And we argued till about 2 in the morning. Because he said, games are for kids. IBM is too conservative of a company. They're never going to buy off on this idea. And the average age of the gamer, and what I told him is the average age of the gamer is 35 years old, right? And this is not what we're playing, right? The kinds of games we're playing can be incredibly adept at explaining complex systems, right? So argue. He finally picks up his stuff and abandons the team. Like he just completely left us. So the rest of us ended up presenting the strategy game idea the next morning. And unbeknownst to me, one of the vice presidents was a judge. And right after the talk, right after the presentation, she pulled me aside and she said, I'm going to fund this video game right now. Can you make it for me in 3 months? I swear, that I wasn't expecting clapping, but it's really shocking, completely unforeseen that could possibly have imagined that happening. So I kind of looked at her and I said, 3 months, it could take years to make a really compelling video game. And she says, well, I just want a proof of concept. Can you even make a video game to help explain something like business process management to people? And who would play it, right? So I ended up making this video game, working with a great local team, and we released it through IBM's academic initiative as a free offering. Basically what this is we create software and we give it to this group of universities for free. And within 6 months, we had over 1,000 schools downloading and using this game, right, to teach. So then what happened is the same vice president turned to me and said, gee, is it just students and teachers who would be interested in games like this? Or what about customers of ours? I'm just curious, would customers of ours, partners of ours be interested? So she gave me more funding to create more games. A supply chain version of the game, traffic management. We created a smarter cities game. And those games just took off as marketing assets. They actually brought in more leads for our brand, for our division at the time, than any other asset. So really focused on games for marketing when I first joined IBM for about a period of about 4 years or so. The process change games in particular got a lot of attention, in particular from the Department of Defense. So due to their interest, and in particular this idea of integrating real data and real processes within very sophisticated gaming engines, I ended up in front of our Secretary of Defense. And it's kind of a funny story because I was literally 8.5 months pregnant. So I was walking around like this, right, presenting disaster response games. But because of their interest, I know, kind of funny if you think about it. So because of their interest, I was asked to then incubate a practice focusing on advanced, serious games within our consulting division. Did that for many years, not just for defense, but manufacturing, insurance, health, all kinds of different industries. Then IBM turns around and says, you know what, we're going to invest a lot of money, a lot of resources in the realm of cognitive computing and cloud. Right? What is it? What are the kinds of things we could do if we took artificial intelligence and really made it modular, for modular consumption, such that developers around the world would be able to sew it in and use it in all kinds of different applications. So that's where I've been sitting here now, right, is really focusing on this intersection of AI and play. And how is it beyond use of just games, how can I use AI to mine information about people, about processes, about environments, and then curate and create experiences that are highly engaging, highly motivating to people, where I can actually get people to change their behaviors, change their mindset about things. And I'm going to give you a whole bunch of different examples so you can get a sense. Okay, so as I said, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir, games can be incredibly powerful instruments of change. These are all the kinds of things that we at IBM have used games for, right? And you can see a whole bunch of different things, from marketing to solving all kinds of different problems, modify behaviors. But really, this is the Holy Grail, this idea of transformation of cultures. How do you change mindsets? So this is not just the realm of video games, by the way. I mean, here's a very sophisticated board game that also attempts to transform cultures. This is actually from an Israeli company. What they did with this board game is they wanted to introduce entrepreneurial thinking, entrepreneurial culture, to big organizations. And they do that actually rather well with this board game. So when we work with all kinds of different customers, what we see is that people are really deluged by big data, right? They're swimming in big data. They feel more disconnected from people than ever before. And they're really trying to find insights, right? And I'll give you a quick story of what I mean by this. So I live in this county within North Carolina, Wake County. And I was invited by the technology group that's responsible for this county. So they're responsible for the school systems, for the police, for the emergency response units, right? All the tech behind these groups. And they asked me to come in and sit in on their first interviews for their very first data scientist, right? So they were going to hire a data scientist to help with this group. And I thought to myself, why are they inviting me? This is strange. So I'm sitting in on the interviews, and the interviews went something like this. At the beginning of the interviews, they would ask the questions, you know, what software do you use? What's your best practice, right? But at the end, they would ask questions like, you realize that the data that you're going to be gathering and curating has huge socioeconomic impact to the citizens of this county. It might help them decide which zip code they're going to live in, who they're going to vote for, right? So they said, how would you present this data in such a way where it's not only going to be consumable by us, but more importantly, by community stakeholders, and he says even more importantly, for the citizens, so they can make better decisions. And guess what each and every one of those data scientists said? Can you guess how they were going to present their data? Bar charts. Every single one. They shrugged. Bar charts? Kind of like that, right? And then they would leave the room, and then the rest of them would turn to me and say, you see now why you're invited here? Because they were thinking there's actually a gap, right? After you aggregate this data and you try and find insights within all this data, how do you then get people to care, right? That's the gap. And they're expecting data scientists to figure this out, right? And like I said, data scientists like, I don't know, bar charts, right? So there's a gap, which means, and when there's a gap, there's an opportunity. And if you're into things like games, gamification, design, motivational design in particular, this is an opportunity for you, especially if you start to merge in artificial intelligence, and cognitive computing in particular, right? Why? Because artificial intelligence in particular, right? You have the ability to mine all kinds of different patterns in order, or all kinds of different data sets, right? In order to be able to find patterns. And when you find out patterns about people, you can then structure experiences, like I said, highly customized, highly curated for them. So some examples. So starting in the world of AI, right? I always go to science fiction, right, as a wonderful catalyst, or I guess, futuristic thinking on what AI could be, starting with Star Trek. In fact, Star Trek, the original series, was really the inspiration for our chief data scientist behind Watson, right? If you're on the Starship Enterprise, you communicate to the onboard computer, not by typing, right, but by natural language. Hey, what's my shield strength? Is that a Klingon ship passing me, right? You can ask questions using natural language. So this, like I said, it was the inspiration behind our original Watson implementation. Do you have this here, Black Mirror? Okay. I highly, highly recommend this series, except for episode 1 of season 1. It's just too gross beyond words. So skip that one, but watch all of the other ones, because especially, for those who don't know, it's really the twilight zone for our times, or really for a little bit into the future. And I have a tremendous interest in artificial intelligence and ethics. And in fact, that's what I'm going to pursue my PhD in. And this has given me such great fodder, right? You watch these episodes and you think, oh yeah, we really shouldn't be deregulating that. Oh yeah. So, these great stories for inspiration. And you think about how artificial intelligence is not just playing games against humans and winning, like what we're seeing. We see that with Jeopardy and with Deep Blue, and then with DeepMind and the playing of Go and the winning of the strategy game Go, right? But now there's also implementations of artificial intelligence being trained through gameplay, right? Which is really, really an interesting space to watch, okay? All right, so this really, really quickly, this is a video of a casual game, and the point is that you're sort of building this tower of toothpicks. It looks kind of like World of Goo. You're trying to reach the glowing orb up at the top. In less than 8 minutes, if you play this game, it will assess what kind of critical thinking style you have, how you approach problem solving, okay? This game... yeah, it's really interesting, right? And what's interesting, if I played, all of us in this room played, it would actually optimize teams for you based on how you approach problem solving. This is all in Hungarian, in case you were wondering. But what's interesting about this, I had the entire Cyber Range Warrior team for the Ministry of Defense play this game. And after they played, every single one of them except one person were categorized as the same critical thinking style. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Very bad. So they're walking out and they're like, uh-oh. Literally, not only do we have to worry about diversity of gender and diversity of ethnicity and race, we have to worry about diversity of thought and problem solving, which, it seems obvious, right? But to think, that through a game like that, it really helped them to see this. The way I'm going to walk through a bunch of the examples that I have with regards to the intersection of AI and play, I'm categorizing them in these 4 different domains where how we've broken up our APIs. So the first one being language. So one of our APIs has the ability to mine both written and spoken text or spoken word in order to glean sentiment, so the emotion that people are feeling. It's called Tone Analyzer. So I'll give you an example. We did this project with a fashion brand called Marchesa, and we did this project for an upcoming fashion show called the Met Gala out in New York City. And what we did was we sewed in little LED lights into this ball gown, and we put in a little computer underneath the folds of the dress, such that anytime anybody tweeted about the Met Gala expressing an emotion, right, the dress would change colors. So if I said, I am so pissed, I'm stuck in traffic, I'm going to be late to the Met Gala, the dress might glow red, right? So why is this interesting? Again, this was just a test to see how can you transform fashion by aggregating sentiment about things, right? How people are feeling. Now imagine taking this to the next level, beyond something like people being pissed off about the Met Gala or happy about a particular dress they saw. What if you connected something like public policy, right? How are people feeling about changing immigration policies, right? Or other political actions that are happening on the ground? How is it that you might then tie in things like art as a means to be able to, dynamic art as a means to be able to express how people are feeling about things that are very complex? Here's an example of how we used the same API, right, to determine how are people feeling the level of sentiment with dynamic streaming data sets, in particular, whether it's live Wimbledon play or through Twitch, live gameplay, video gameplay, right? So I can go and using that video feed say, okay, look, the excitement level is going up, the noise level, action recognition, crowd cheering, like how are people tweeting at which points of the game? And if I know when certain points within gameplay are more interesting, more exciting than others, guess what? I can actually focus on it, try to recreate it. That kind of knowledge is gold to a game designer. You guys with me? So this could be incredibly, incredibly powerful. Here's another API, personality insights. I can take anybody's Twitter feed or a speech they wrote or something they have said online, right? And run it through this API to determine their personality. And we've done this with all the major political figures, politicians, right? All of these reports are available online if you're at all curious. But it's very interesting to see what you can do. We actually created a recipe. This is the Harry Potter sorting hat. We built this, right? Where I can go in and I can put in someone's Twitter ID, or I can look them up on Wikipedia and it says, oh yeah, that person, he should be in Slytherin for sure, right? Very interesting. So I'll give you another example in role-playing games, right? Let's say you're creating a character from scratch. You decide you're going to be a sorceress and you do your milestones in order to level up. What if instead of allowing the player necessarily to choose their own way, what if you ask them for their Twitter handle? They put in their Twitter handle, does the analysis, it says, oh, you're a troll. You're going to be a troll in this game. And you might laugh, but what's interesting about this is people love to learn about themselves. Have you ever been on Facebook and seen all those stupid little quizzes like, which Star Wars character are you? I'm Chewbacca. What about you? And it means nothing, but it's interesting for some reason. So people do love to learn about themselves. So again, using an API like this, learning their personality, what kind of experience that can then you create targeted to that particular personality type. All right, some more. This is kind of interesting. I don't know. I'll have to hike up my volume. With this one, you're creating custom music based on your personality. So with this one, I put in my Twitter handle, and here's the music that it came up for me. I did that this morning. That's me, apparently. Sounds like chaos, I don't know. But hopefully I'm not that chaotic. Here's an example of, we worked with Red Storm Entertainment, which is owned by Ubisoft. They've got the Star Trek Bridge Crew game. This is a virtual reality experience, right? Where we helped train a chat bot in order to be able to converse with players within the game, obviously, right? Just like you're on the Star Trek Bridge Crew, right? Or you're on the Starship Enterprise. Again, the way that you communicate with the computer. What's my shield strength, right? Et cetera, et cetera. Doing it directly within the VR experience. This is a video. This is a project that I did with a high school out in Texas. This happened about 2 years or so ago. This high school is very special. It was designated as being disadvantaged, meaning over 80% of the kids get free or reduced lunches. And I want to tell you this because this is not a fancy school. This is not a fancy community. This is not just for rich kids, right? Again, over 80% get special help, right? So this teacher, his name is David Conover. He reached out to me. He says, hey, I'm teaching computer science, but the way that I'm teaching it is through game design. But he says, not just game design, serious game design. And he says, I've got a government agency that's sponsoring a theme this year. And the theme is, it's for the Center of Disease Control. And they said they want our class to design a game such that it's specifically to teach other kids about pandemics and pathogens. So he says, my kids have reskinned Minecraft such that you can fly a nanobot through a human body. And when the nanobot meets up with a pathogen, we want to be able to ask questions of Watson, like, how would I recognize Ebola? And what are the symptoms of tuberculosis, right? So we started to create this recipe for them to be able to follow. And what was really interesting is as we were working with this team, I grabbed this group of volunteers and we started to work with this class. This class was just off the charts enthusiastic. In fact, several of the students, just their backgrounds and their level of interest, there was this one girl in the class, I was asking her, I said, why are you taking this class? Why is it so interesting to you? And she says, my dad has been on, multiple tours of duty in Iraq and Afghanistan. And she said, he suffers from extreme PTSD. And the only thing that can help him manage his stress is playing video games, first-person shooters. And she said, I am dedicating my school career towards really understanding games for mental health. She says, I really want to understand this really well. And she says, that's why I'm here. But each and every one of them had a story like this. And I decided, because it was such a compelling class, I convinced IBM's comms and PR department to send a TV crew out with me to go and meet with this class. And we filmed this short video. This video since went viral. And because of this video, the teacher and I were invited to many conferences worldwide to go and present what had happened. Within a month of that video being created, the teacher was invited to the White House and recognized by President Obama as being a champion of change for education. Within 2 weeks of that, the teacher gives me a phone call. And he says, Phaedra, I think I'm going to lose my job. I said, what are you talking about? Why would you lose your job? He said, because my principal doesn't understand what we're trying to do in our classroom. He doesn't understand. He doesn't know. And mind you, he wasn't just working with IBM. He had NASA scientists coming in, Microsoft, Google, right? I was like, are you out of your mind? What do you mean your principal doesn't understand what you're trying to do? He says, look, you're drug busts in the hall regularly. Like, I am not playing their game. I am really trying to do an entrepreneurial culture, entrepreneurial thinking, social impact, thinking outside the box. And he says, I can't do it. I'm going to die here. I said, okay, here's what you got to do. Call up your superintendent and take him out for breakfast. Okay? Tell him everything. So he goes out for breakfast with the superintendent, and the superintendent pulls him aside and says, you know what, this is on me. I've got to figure out how to give you air cover. I've got to figure out how to make a safe space for you to be able to not only embed this culture that you're building within this classroom across this school, but across all school systems within the state of Texas. So next thing I know, all of them, the principal, the assistant principal, the curriculum director, the superintendent, the teacher, like this entire army from Texas, flies out to North Carolina, where I live, and we do a design thinking session about culture change within the classroom. I don't know, how many of you have taken design thinking before? Have you learned design thinking? A couple? I swear by this framework. If you're thinking about really optimizing experiences, user-centric, human-centric design thinking is a fantastic framework to follow, even as something like culture change within the classroom. Okay, so we do this, and then I start to drag them around to maker spaces and universities, and I talk about this big technology tsunami, automation, artificial intelligence, robotics. I'm saying we must be changing the culture of the classroom now. We've got to be teaching new collar skills now, not tomorrow. So what happened was they invited me to go and present to the school board, which unlocked funding for an academy such that kids coming out of his class can go and intern at the Watson Lab out in Texas. And the reason why I think this is such a cool story is not because of games. It's not even because of technology. For this particular use case, what interests me is that it's about culture change. And I think this kind of culture change is absolutely imperative in the realm of education. And I think École 42 absolutely has that pulse, right, on the sense of culture change and what it will take to change education as well. So here's what these kids are doing now, right? This API features Watson Internet of Things. Do you remember the old toy Hungry Hippos? Remember this? It's a bunch of plastic hippos in a ring. You're pushing the lever, and your hippo's mouth opens, and it eats marbles. That's Hungry Hippos. It's an old game, maybe 40 years old, maybe more, 50 years old. Anyway, so these kids, they bought, again, entrepreneurial thinking, entrepreneurial culture, they bought a used emotive device, brainwave monitoring device off of eBay. They hooked up Arduinos to the hippos such that the only way you can get your hippo to eat a marble without your hands is you've got to go into a semi-meditative state. So you actually have to lower your heart rate, calm your mind, and start meditating in order to beat hungry hippos. Where are these kids? Can you guess? Where are these kids piloting this new smart toy? They're playtesting it with other kids going through chemotherapy at the Dell Children's Hospital, right? Incredible. Genius. No one told them, now here's what you're going to learn. You know what I mean? Like, these kids came up with this. We introduced them to Internet of Things. Yes, we introduced them to Arduinos, right? But entrepreneurial thinking, connecting the dots. How can we take an old toy and make it something completely new, completely revolutionary that solves a really great problem, right? Kids going through chemo and a lot of pain. How can we help them better manage their stress? I love this story. In fact, everything that I've learned from this classroom, the medical Minecraft story, the hungry hippos, this is actually my new job, my new role at IBM, is actually thinking about creating our first K through 12 program, right? If we're going to go and influence curriculum, change the culture of the classroom well before university, how can we take all of this, the entrepreneurial thinking, the social impact, games, toys, play, and really think about how to tackle it? Here's another example, right, with the BB-8 toy. This is actually one of our marketing directors. He programmed this, right, where again, he's like, I always wanted to be a Jedi. And so he's controlling the BB-8 droid with his mind. It's so cute when he does it. This is an example of an oil rig that has been recreated within the Unity 3D engine. This isn't so groundbreaking when you see it. What is groundbreaking is that every time you see a display or a dashboard or the weather, all of this is actually in real time. So what I would see if I see a person right there, that's actually where the person is standing on the real oil rig, right? The weather, same thing. Is it raining? Is it sunny? Is it blah? So being able to recreate worlds in real time dynamically. So another project use of APIs is being able to analyze user data, right? So this is a project that we're doing with Sesame Street to tackle things like personalized learning. If I can use AI to mine patterns of data like what level of a reader is this particular person? What's their style of gameplay? What is their critical thinking style? What kind of preferences do they have? The more information I can learn just through watching them. I'm not asking questions. It's not a survey, right? Just by watching their actions and behaviors, I can actually serve up levels of gameplay or ed tech or learning based on what I'm learning about them. Highly customized, highly personalized. Okay, and in fact, one of the offerings that we have for free that we're giving with regards to data insights is something called Watson Teacher Advisor. Same sort of thing. A teacher enters in information about a student, right? You're gathering a lot of data, and it will make recommendations to the teacher about what you should be learning next, or what kinds of assets or things for you to complete next. Okay, the next realm is vision. So there's a bunch of cool APIs with regards to vision. So again, mining patterns of data, structured and unstructured data sets. With this one, I'll give you the example of predator drone, right? So I can train this API to recognize patterns of images. If you fly a drone too close to the nest of a predatory bird, the predatory bird is likely to try to take the drone down. I don't know if you've ever seen this before, right? So our research scientists have programmed Watson to try to recognize what predatory bird is chasing the drone and then try to play a sound that's especially terrifying to that kind of bird, right? So we're actually teaching this to kids in high school now, right? That's actually one of our recipes. But this kind of idea, right? This other one where you might not have the entire image trained, but even a partial image. So this is called Similarity Search. Like, let's say you've got a camera and you're watching this boy build this robot. Let's say he's about up to here in terms of what he's built, right? He hasn't built the torso, just the legs. You might have an API say, well, there's a 67% chance that this kid is building a robot. You know, with that kind of intel, even if you're not 100% sure, but you can start to make guesses, what are the kinds of experiences which you could create with something like that? Speech. This is a demo that we did in a VR world, right? So here's this woman, and she is merely saying the word gorilla, right? So she says the word gorilla, and lo and behold, this gorilla appears. So it's very interesting to say, I want a baby gorilla. And here's the kind of physics, the kind of behaviors that I want them to display. Again, being able to recognize what words are being said and figuring out the context. So again, you can do a lot of really cool things with regards to this as well. Now, here's one of my favorite examples. Imagine taking everything I've described to you so far and sort of mashing it all up holistically, right? So I've got the speech to text, tone analyzer, dialogue, vision, Internet of Things, and I'm mashing it all together. What you can build with something like this is called an empathetic conversation bot. What does this mean? So you're familiar with what chat bots are, right? Where you can train it in a particular dialogue. An empathy bot is one that will know if you're feeling sad. It will know what kind of room you're in. It will guess what your age is, right? It might even, if it's hooked up to Internet of Things, it might even know whether you slept well the last couple of weeks, right? So again, the more information I can glean, now imagine you can actually create a highly customized experience when you know that kind of information. So I don't know if you can see this, it's kind of dark, but ibm.biz/chatbots for good, we actually released, that's our very first course that we've released for high school kids. So not only are we teaching high school kids about design thinking through this online course, but we also teach them how to build an empathy bot. Introduction to chatbots, introduction to tone analyzer. And this is actually the reason why we came up with this particular idea. So I had this client of mine who was the head of the trauma unit for the city of New Orleans during Katrina. And his specialty was childhood trauma. And he said, he came to me and he said, you know, after all these years of specializing in trauma, he said, I think I've come up with a way of helping people's minds, in particular children's minds, be more resilient in the face of disasters. Have you ever met someone where really terrible things will happen to them again and again and again, and something about their personality allows them to bounce back really quickly? Have you ever met someone like this? Yeah? So he believes that you can actually train somebody's mind to do this. Kind of like he talked about it in martial arts terms, like building muscle memory, okay? So he came to me and he said, help me design a disaster preparedness game for kids. I want to actually use a game as a framework for something like this. And when we went through the design thinking process, like, all right, let's figure out how we're going to approach this kind of a design, the first step is empathy maps. And as we're doing this empathy map work, like, all right, who are our end users, as we're thinking about these kids, it really became quickly apparent you can't build just a hard-coded game for anybody here. Like, the kids really wanted to feel like they were being heard. Their particular situation was heard. I am stuck in a shelter, and I am 13 years old. I am terrified. I can't find my parents. You know what I mean? Or I'm 15 years old, and I am absolutely terrified of an active shooter walking into this room. You know what I mean? Like, I wanted to know what that particular, they want to know that they are being heard. So we came up with this idea of an empathy bot as being part of his core IP. And so that's really been the inspiration. It's amazing the kinds of things, the kinds of experiences, the way you can curate gameplay when you think about what you can do when you mash these things up. So here's some thoughts on what's next, especially within the realm of play, right? So storytelling, being able to make storytelling come to life. Imagine you hear a child say vroom. So it's not even a word, right? It's just sounds, right? But it makes your car go faster. Or here's this girl narrating the story. You know, I'm on a brown pony and I'm crossing over this wooden bridge into this meadow. And as she's speaking, the world is coming alive, right? These kinds of things, making it come to life. Or you have imaginary play, right? And you've got kids who are pretending that there's an alien invasion just by hearing the words of, oh, these kids, analysis, pattern, alien invasion, the lights start going on and off. Your Amazon Echo or, you know, your local device starts to have, you know, special spaceship noises or something to that effect, right? So physical world play integration, right? How can all of these objects now be pulled in to really transform the world of storytelling and play? Another area of, again, great interest of mine is artificial intelligence and ethics, right? What are the ethical implications? I mentioned Black Mirror, right? Data privacy. What does this mean, right? What are the kinds of regulations that need to be put in place to ensure that this data is never misused? So this is something that I highly encourage you to take an interest in, you know, whether it comes to what's happening with regards to legislation in your own area or just on a worldwide basis. That's something to always, always, always be cognizant of. Okay? All right. So in summary, you can do a lot with this, as I mentioned. It's not just about augmenting play and augmenting fun, but really, in effect, to get people to care, to motivate them, to change their behaviors, change their mindsets. This could be a truly powerful tool. So all these recipes are available online, like I said, for free. So the Hungry Hippos, the medical Minecraft. This is a TJ bot where it helps you integrate with a very simple robot, all of these different APIs. The Harry Potter sorting hat. We've got some really, really cool stuff for you guys to play around with. All right, now I'm going to pause, take a breath, take a drink of water, and see if you guys have any questions for me. And I can pass around the mic too if you wish, or I'll just repeat your question. I know I threw a lot at you. Yes?
On the subject of automated pedagogues, in a sense, have you thought about working with nonprofits like Khan Academy? Because they already have a large database of classes that they could use, but they don't really have the sort of following that you would have with a teacher. And your technology, I think, would be extremely well used in that context.
Yes, indeed. In fact, as I'm thinking about K through 12 and how to tackle something like this, being able to form these kinds of alliances is absolutely imperative. This is not the job of any single one company. So yes, yes, and more yes. And in fact, with regards to online versus traditional, so these kinds of classes we're putting forth in both traditional as well as non-traditional learning spaces, meaning after-school programs, Boys and Girl Scouts, Girls Who Code, first robotics leagues. And what I'm finding, apart from teachers like the one in Texas, I call them unicorn teachers, right? It's these after-school programs that they get it immediately, and they're running in that direction. Whereas school systems, for whatever reason, it's harder. It takes longer for them to move. My hope is through peer pressure and like watching what everybody else is doing, they're going to see the light and also move in that direction. But in the meantime, that's what our area of focus is. Des autres questions? Okay, merci pour votre temps aujourd'hui. Thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you.